Good morning, everyone. Happy Easter. That prelude Diane just sang really ushered it in, even though the weather has not. I remember a Bach chorale that we used to sing at Easter that the last line was, "And nature with a cry burst chanting into spring." So maybe that will happen this afternoon. But it's good to see you and to be with you today. I was thinking that it's a rare occurrence for Easter and Passover and Ramadan to all converge at this time. And I was thinking of all of the prayers and the fasting and the vigils and that are happening all over the world, and hoping that that will make some difference, shift something, move us out of the darkness into the light. Richard asked me to say that there are buttons and pins back there for Ukraine, and if you would take one and leave a donation, they go to the UUA service committee that supports refugees. Is that right, Richard? Good. And trying to think any other announcements. You can find all these announcements in the order of service, if you will.
Happy Easter, everyone. Happy Easter. It's good to see you. Today is a joyful day with Easter eggs and bunny rabbits and the makings of all things new, all things, even relationships. I've been reflecting on the meaning of Easter this year, and I'd like to share my thoughts with you as an expression of the fourth principle of Unitarian Universalism, which is the free and responsible search for truth and meaning. The truth and meaning that I found this Easter has to do with relationship, particularly with the kind of relationship that needs renewal, that needs new life. The relationship to which I've been drawn, for some reason, is a relationship between science and religion. I'm not really certain why I've been drawn to this topic. That's unknown to me. I have my suspicions. I think it's because I've been really missing my dad lately. Easter brings me present to him at this time, because it is a time when that which has died away from us can return again in a beautiful way. It's the promise and the drama of spring, and I'm really into it this year. I think about those who rose at daybreak this morning to climb Mount Peg at sunrise and proclaim he has risen to earth and sky. It was a snowy sunrise, if you were up for it. I've never seen that before. A sun shower with snow. May wonders never cease. Let me just share one thing. My dad was an architect, an engineer, a scientist in a way, as compared to the hippie poet artist son that he raised. We were opposites in many ways, and as they say, opposites attract. My father liked people like Frank Lloyd Wright, like Frederick Law Olmsted. He respected Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein, the great scientist, had a lot to say on the topic of religion. He said, "The most beautiful experience that we can have is that of the mysterious. It is the fundamental emotion which stands in the cradle of true art and true science. However, whoever does not know it can no longer wonder, no longer marvel, and is as good as dead. His eyes are dimmed. It was the experience of mystery, even mixed with fear, that engendered religion. A knowledge of the experience of something we cannot penetrate, our perceptions of the profoundest reason and most radiant beauty, which only in the most primitive forms are accessible to our minds. It is in this knowledge and in this emotion that constitute true religiosity. In this sense, Albert Einstein says, I am a deeply religious man." I respected Albert Einstein too, but the coolest scientist that I knew as a child was from a far and distant planet. He was Vulcan, and he served as the science officer on the Starship Enterprise. Spock was my favorite scientist. You can take the boy out of the heavens, but you can't take the heavens out of the boy. I was always in the heavens. My friends and I played Star Trek incessantly. I was deeply committed. My mom bought me the Star Trek owner's manual when I was a kid. And my dad, ever the architect, he bought the blueprints for the Starship Enterprise, wanting to find a bridge of connection, perhaps, that would excite me about architecture. That didn't work. My dad was a practical and more poetic man than he was a practical man more than he was poetic. More science than religion, but science fiction didn't excite him in the slightest. I miss him so. I miss his near total dismissal of Captain Kirk and Spock and the Enterprise. But this Easter I remember him at sunrise, when mystery pushes away that which had been weighing on our hearts, when that which has died away from us can return in a beautiful way. In my free and responsible search for truth and meaning this Sunday morning, I wonder who or what it was that makes this new life possible. Come, let us spend this morning together. I need it. Good morning and good Sunday. I hope that this new day finds you well. Today is Sunday, April the 17th, and the title of this morning's reflection is 7 Holy Words. This title reflects a tradition that dates back to the time of Jesus, but I've departed from my plan and I've applied this principle to life as it is today. Without irony, but with peace and with wonder. Without disbelief, but with joy and with hopefulness. And hopefully with a little bit of levity, lightness for the lifting of the spirit. So if you could write your name in the sky and tell your story in just 7 words, what would those 7 words be? We don't have to answer this question right now, but it's enough to look to the ground beneath our feet for genuine encouragement, for the grasses and the early flowers and the garlic are brave in their rising. Lo, the earth awakes again. Right now it is enough to look high above our heads to the stars in heaven as they gently sing. Today is Easter Sunday. Welcome one and all to the beauty of this good day, when that which has fallen away from us can return. Now, before I begin, I've been thinking about something. I've been thinking about how opposites attract. I saw this science fiction movie years ago. It was called Contact. Has anyone seen it? Jodie Foster stars in it. I wish that I could magically make it so that we could all watch it together right now. We could make up a ton of popcorn, and we could eat it quietly and crumblessly in the sanctuary. And we could draw the shades that we don't have over these great windows that we do have, and the windows that let in such beautiful, gorgeous morning light. And we could make it dark enough in here to enjoy the movie experience. If we did that, I wonder what might rise in us. So Contact is really great. It's based on a novel by Carl Sagan. Carl Sagan is a scientist and an astronomer, so perhaps ironically, his flight of fantasy is rooted in the realities that we face, if that makes sense. Contact stars Matthew McConaughey and Jodie Foster, and the story that they weave together is lovely. Contact is a story about the mysteries of time and space, but as you might imagine, there is a romantic subtext woven in. Now, I won't blow the movie for you, although it's 25 years old. And it strikes me that this book that I held up with you, I've had this book for 47 years. I am in denial about my age, and this book betrays my lie to myself. I thought it would be cute to bring it up here, and it's haunting me. In the film, Jodie Foster plays the part of a disciplined scientist. Her name is Dr. Ellie Arroway. She is a rugged empiricist. The only things that she believes are the things that she can objectively verify with telescopes and radar arrays and incredible calculations. After searching the heavens for years, the stars, the planets, and the nebula, she finds conclusive evidence of extraterrestrial life. And not just this, because she also receives the architectural blueprints and the conceptual plans for the making of a mysterious time travel machine. Now, Matthew McConaughey plays a minister with wounds and an interesting life story, on the basis of which he challenges Ellie to reveal her own. The minister challenges the scientist to think more deeply about the heavens in order to rest from life, in order to draw from our living of it the makings of peace and true contentment. Now, he challenges the scientist. He confronts her with powerful questions. He challenges her to share her views on the universe, on family, and on old wounds, as he begins by sharing his own story. You know, it's funny, but the minister almost confesses to the scientist. He says, "It's an old story, really. I grew up in South Boston, more or less on the streets. By the time I was 13, I had tried my first hit of heroin. By the time I was 15, I had stopped using it, but I was dealing full time. By the time I was 19, I decided that I didn't want to live anymore, and at least not in the world like the one I was living in. I got on a bus, and I got as far as Ohio before I ran out of money. And after that, I just kept walking. I didn't eat, I didn't sleep, I just walked. I ended up collapsing in a wheat field, and there was a storm, and I woke up." And that's about as far as words will go. And Dr. Ellie was interested. The scientist asked him to go further, to do the best that he could, and he said, "I had an experience of belonging, an experience of unconditional love. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't terrified, I wasn't alone." And Ellie says, "And there's no chance you had that experience simply because part of you needed to have that experience?" And the minister gets a little angry. And he says, "Look, I'm a reasonable person and reasonably intelligent, but this experience went far beyond them both. For the first time, I had to consider the possibility that intellect, as wonderful it is not the only way of comprehending the universe, that it's too small, too inadequate a tool to deal with what we're actually faced with." And then the scientist, taking a beat, shared a bit more intimately. To the minister, she said, "You may not believe this, but there's a part of me that wants more than anything to believe in your God. to believe that we are all here for a purpose, that all of this means something. But it's because that part of me wants to believe it so badly that I am so stubborn about making sure that it isn't just a self-delusion. Of course I want to know God if there is one, but it has to be real. And unless I have proof, I can't be sure. And then the minister asked the scientist, "Do you love your parents?" And Dr. Ellie is taken back. She almost confesses to the minister, "You know, I never knew my mother, and my father died when I was 9. And the minister pushes further. Gently and firmly at the same time, he asks again, but more sharply, "Did you love him?" And when she shares that yes, she did, he goes for it. He challenges the scientist to face the contradiction that lay at the heart of it all. The minister challenged the scientist by gently saying to her, "If you love him, prove it." And there was nothing that she could do. She just stood there quietly. Now, I'd like to tell you that they then kissed and fell in love and lived on and happily and ever after and yada, yada, yada. But all of that, I didn't have time to watch the film before this morning, and I haven't seen it in 25 years. So I've forgotten how it ends. All I can say is that I hope that they kissed and that they loved. I'm a big fan of yada, yada, yada. The possibility that they experienced this does truly exist on this Easter Sunday, alongside of many other interesting options. Now, I'd like to tell you the real ending, but I can't. Really and truly, I do not know. All I can share with you this morning is the mystery. Now, I didn't plan it like that, but I'm really glad it turned out that way. All I can do is share with you another little story, a story about something that I loved and lost forever to time, until it came back to life somehow, when life and I were lucky. Now, I wonder what you'll think of this. It makes sense to me to share it today because it's Easter Sunday, and it's a time when miracles and all their blessings are possible. Now, I used to be more skeptical about Easter. I used to be a bit more sort of darker and more fearful of it somehow. I love it now. I used to feel disconnected, though, by the story that I learned in Sunday school. In the gospel, there are passages that explain how Jesus was crucified, and soon after, how there came a council member, a good and righteous man, they say, and he asked for the body for burial, and through Pilate, this was done. The council members saw that the body was wrapped in cloth and honorably buried, placed in an earthen tomb that was then sealed hard and fast with a heavy stone, a stone that was heavy as death itself. And next we learn that the two women had come with Jesus from Galilee, that they had followed, and that they saw the tomb and how the body had been placed. We learn that the women spent time preparing spices and perfume to offer where he was laid to rest. But before they did, they rested before traveling. The women visited the tomb with gifts, and when they arrived, they were amazed because they discovered that the heavy stone that had sealed the tomb had been rolled away. The women entered the tomb, but they found no body wrapped and carefully placed inside. Instead, they found two men who were radiantly dressed, and they were scared, but they still listened as they spoke. The two men asked, "Why do you look for the living among the dead? He's not here. He has risen." And the women were filled with wonder. Now, I love this story now, but I didn't when I was younger. And I'm very glad that I wasn't required to love this story. I was trusted by my faith community to find the miracle of seasonal rebirth in a way that mattered most to me at the time. That process of discovery keeps unfolding still today. Did you see dawn this morning? Did you see the sun come up? And before it did, how magically the moon lit the clouds from behind, and how the birds came to sing with one another. At least I think that they were singing together. They could have been arguing for all I know. I don't understand their language. I have no idea what they were saying. I just know that it sounded beautiful. It sounded like they knew that it was Easter Sunday. What I love about this faith, what strikes me about its beauty, is that we trust ourselves to discover the beauty of the world in ways that resonate most for us. For some of us are deeply touched by the story of resurrection, and others of us experience it quite differently. The scientist in me, the engineer, the architect, the part of my Father that lives in me, my mind, the practical side struggles so much to believe. But my soul is drawn by mystery and by miracle. My mind is still prone to doubt. I have to remember that Easter story does not appeal to the doubtful scientist in me. It appeals to the part of me that wonders, the part of me that is drawn by mystery. The doubtful scientist in me thinks that resurrection is impossible, and that there is more to me than just this doubtful scientist. I'm not down and dour all the time. I don't walk around removing the magic from the waking world, at least not like I used to. There was a time when I surely did. I guess I have to admit that there was a time when I did this. It used to be that when I got going, I became super headstrong. I would weed the miracle from the garden, and I would lose the joy of life. But some time ago, I realized that I didn't want to do that anymore. I remembered that part of Eden was always a little bit tameless and wild, and part of me is that way too. Sometimes you can let the garden grow as she pleases. You never know what's possible until you let it happen. And it's amazing sometimes. Sometimes it's just a whole lot of weeds. Over the last few years, I've been changing. In fact, last year my garden was a mess, but oh my God, you should have seen the sunflowers and the birds that gathered around. So now I think I've gone overboard a little bit the other way. Now I'm all into the Easter story. I'm changing, musically even. I started playing a lot more blues. I used to be more of a folk guitarist. Jesus shows up a whole lot in the blues, if you know what I mean. And the blues is a whole lot stronger than my tendency to doubt. And so I sing lyrics now that surprise me. Lines like, you and I've got trouble and there's trouble everywhere, but I'm calling on the Lord to come on. May a brighter day fall across your way and soon. You know I'm a doubter. I like to think I'm right. Still let it be your will, not my own. Shatter all my bones. Build me up a righteous man. So who am I singing to? It's not my lawyer or my therapist. I don't want to think about this too much. It's only a song. And I say that knowing, hopefully, that you don't believe me when I say it's only a song. Unlike Dr. Ellie, I don't want to know things for sure. I like my doubt. I cherish my doubt. I don't ask God and Jesus for their state-issued ID. I simply want to be open to the possibility of the miracle, if it happens. My friend Dana Kurtz sings a lot about this subject. I think her songs are prayers. She thinks her songs are songs. All I know for sure is that she likes to laugh at me. She sings, I think this Jesus sounds like a good man. Be as humble and grateful and kind as you can. That hatred and violence breed hatred again. I think this Jesus sounds like a good man. She asks, what if the trouble came straight to your door? What if your table knew plenty no more? With whom would you share? And from whom would you hoard? What if the trouble came straight to your door? She raises this question in the context of what's happening in Mariupol, where life-affirming miracle is needed right now. She'd sing it with her feet right there in the rubble if she could. She's brave and dangerous like that when she dares to be, just like any and all of us. She sings, "If Jesus came back, he'd be shaking his head. As we searched for the missing and counted our dead, he'd say, 'Did you or didn't you hear what I said?' If Jesus came back, he'd be shaking his head. They say if Jesus returns, he'll come back to us as beloved community." What would that mean in Ukraine, in Yemen, in Syria, in Afghanistan right now? What would it mean for women's rights in Texas and in Oklahoma? What would it mean for voting rights in 17 states across the country? What would it mean for trans kids these days? Dana's right. If Jesus came back, he'd be shaking his head. But that's hardly all that he would be doing, because there is a wild side in the garden and beautiful things are growing there. In fact, beautiful things have been growing there for quite some time. There's something changing in me. I even freaked out an old friend a little while ago. I hurt her by accident. I was sitting outside of a church I used to go to playing my guitar, and the song that I was playing blew her mind. I played an old country gospel song about the spirit of resurrection. I played a song that was written in the old time religion words, and that triggered her. She became upset about the words that I sang, and I felt bad about it. I sang a song that's actually in our hymnal, but I sang the earlier version of this tune. It used to be called "Guide Me, O Thou Great Jehovah." You might know it under a different title. It's been reworded and renamed. Now Unitarian Universalists know this song as "God of Grace and God of Glory." It's number 115 in our hymnal. We sing, "God of grace and God of glory, on thy people pour thy power. Crown thine ancient church's story, bring this bud to glorious flower." It's a springtime thing, good for Easter, and the refrain is widely known. Grant us wisdom, grant us courage for the living of this hour, for the living of this hour. I had learned to finger pick the country gospel version, and I figured out, but what I figured out confused and confounded my friend. Her name was Phaedra. Something that I sang hurt her bad. The words I sang, I thought were beautiful. They were clearly Christian though, and that did not work for her. In fact, she said that she had chosen to come to the Unitarian Universalist church that we both attended in order to escape the religion that she knew when she was young. She thought that it was the job of the church to protect her from all of that. I didn't know any of this because Phaedra hadn't told me. She never told me about her wounds and about her old stories of the past. I didn't know it at the time, but there was an explosive energy hiding just beneath the surfaces of things. And I stepped on it inadvertently, and things blew up with us. Now, we all have wounds and stories. I'm learning about Phaedra's stories, and she's learning all about mine. As it turned out, it was a rich experience, but it didn't start out that way. I know we all have wounds somewhere, but I really hated that when I sang a song that I loved, it was hurting on Phaedra's underbelly. I sang, "Guide me, O thou great Jehovah, pilgrim through this barren land. I am weak, and thou art mighty. Hold me with thy powerful hand." I used to not sing words like that, but I learned in seminary about the awesome power of submission. It took a Sufi scholar and a seminar class of several months and a crying session to teach me how to lay down my sword and shield, like the old song teaches us to. It took me a long while, but my spirit learned how to surrender in a sacred way, how to surrender without injury. I have a wound around submission and surrender that's pretty deep. In my past, I was betrayed by people who I dearly loved. And when that happened, I closed down, and it's been hard to open back up. Over time, as I healed, the Easter story really grew on me, not because of what happened to Jesus back then, but because of what can happen for us today. I like that I'm changing. I like that I read the gospel story differently. I don't station Jesus at the center of things anymore. I use the story as a means by which we can learn about ourselves, learn about humility. We all fall short sometimes. Lord knows that I do. When I fall short, I feel sorry and I try to apologize. Forgiveness is so hard and it takes so long sometimes, but when it happens, something rises, like the morning sun within us. I was feeling this in the music. I was healing when I sang, bread of heaven, feed me until I want no more. But Phaedra wasn't hearing me. She wasn't hearing me heal. She was just hearing the words that triggered an old injury. She behaved as if she had lost something that she had truly come to love, something that she valued, something that she believed had been within me that was so dear to her. Suddenly, that seemed lost and lifeless to her. Even as I was singing about what I felt was the opposite. I sang about treading the verge of Jordan and overcoming great challenges. Phaedra felt abandoned and my heart just broke. It really shattered. In the song, I had heard the Easter story, a story of hopefulness, rejuvenation, renewal, and rebirth, a story of overcoming impossible darkness and terrible odds. Phaedra just closed down. She felt alone and that no one cared for her, least of all me. But I didn't feel that way, of course, but Phaedra was afraid that she was all alone and that fear took over. She had to work through it. We had to work through it for a while. But over time, things came together. Something that we lost came back to life, thank God. Thank the mysteries of life. Thank the spirit of wonder within us all. Now, I don't know for sure, but I would like to think that what helped us to restore the power of our connection was the ability to be honest with ourselves and honest with each other. Somehow that allowed us to overcome so much. Phaedra wanted a blissful escape, and I could not provide that for her. I wanted to be heroic and guide her through a crisis that was much larger than me. Somehow, though, through some miracle, we found our way back together. Now, the craziest thing about this story took place a little while later. I was in North Carolina writing a poem about raptors, the birds that kind of soar like hawks in the sky. And something became so clear to me, that all of this had been a dream. Phaedra was not a parishioner of mine in an old church I used to go to. Phaedra was a long-lost part of myself. It wasn't Phaedra who had trouble with the old-school Christian language. It wasn't Phaedra who was afraid of her old wounds. It wasn't Phaedra who thought that and feared that she would be left all alone. It was only me. And when I realized this, it was as if something that had died away from me suddenly returned in a beautiful way. I thought, as the raptors circled high in the sky above my head, as they soared and as they circled like Kansas upside-down tornadoes into the sky. I thought that the raptors see so clearly, with vision 8 times sharper than our own, they say. Sometimes we see clearly and other times clarity is more challenging. But if we were today to follow the raptors into the sky, if we were to open our heart our mind, our soul as widely as we possibly could. And with all that openness, if we wrote our names upon the sky and told our story in only 7 words, what would our 7 words be? Now, you'll have to tell me if you discover which 7 words are true to you. But if it were up to me, the 7 words would be love from the bottom of your heart. May it be so. Happy Easter. Blessed be, and amen.